particularly today ask about?
Well, I'll just go first. I think for me, I've been through a little bit of a time now where we're trying to work things out and how to work things within in the heavenly realm and also work it out on earth, and sort of a struggle with the Father and issues with the Father heart and so on. So working through that is sometimes a bit painful, but you have to get through it. And I actually just opened the Engaging God program now, because I normally download modules onto my phone, and then every now and again I go back to, oh, you've added new things. And I was just listening to the framing of your life and the governmental sonship part. And it was just exactly speaking again to what I need to do, and just in the mornings coming up and framing it. And it's the essential, how essential it is to actually get in the morning with God and submit your day to Him, because what I do find is I'll so easily go off into DIY land. And I don't know if the rest of the people feel that it happens to you as well, because you get busy and you have to survive and everything. So it's not so much a question as a comment around just getting that place. I think where what happened for me was I didn't see or experience much, and then you start doing things your own. It's almost like God withdrew a bit. It's like, well, you go and do it. There's a couple of things he said we do it, and I asked him for help, and said, no, you go and do it. Like he said to Moses when the Pharaoh was chasing them and he was by the Red Sea, and Moses asked him, what must I do? He said, well, why are you asking me? You go and do it. And then, okay, well, how do I do it? What do I do? And so on. It's sometimes a bit difficult to figure it out. And yeah, working that through is just life's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think once you have the intimacy with the Father, in that you really trust Him for provision and protection and direction, then engaging in him relationally to begin to get his heart is the key. Whether you get that cognitively or not is not so much the issue. It's just the fact that you've engaged with desire for his heart. I only want to do what I see you doing, or I only want to do what's an outworking of your heart, is another way to put it. And if we can engage in intimacy without the agenda of trying to find his heart, but just in love, hey, I just love spending time with you, Father. And we only, each of us will know whether we've got a hidden agenda or an agenda which we're not being honest about, which is, I really want to know what you want me to do, because if I don't, then I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. Then that whole old covenant mindset kicks in if we agendarize it out of fear in some way. So do I want to fulfill the desires of God's heart for me today? Yes. But my primary purpose of engaging him is because I want to spend time with him, be close to his heart. And as a consequence of being close to his heart, he actually directs me and guides me without necessarily me needing to know in a cognitive way all the time. Therefore, he's writing his heart on my heart, because we're heart-to-heart cardiogenosis relationship. And I'm not coming to him anymore to say, well, what do you want me to do today? Which is what I used to do, when I first started engaging heaven. And, well, what's my mandate? What am I supposed to do today? What am I authorized to do? And I didn't want to do anything that I wasn't authorized to do. But there was an element of fear to that, because I wanted to get it right, because I thought I needed to get it right to make God happy. Well, God's already happy. He's already pleased with me, irrespective of what I do, because it's unconditional. So now I want to spend time in the presence of God, in conversation, listening, talking, being in his presence. And if there's something he really wants me to know directly, then he'll tell me. If he doesn't tell me anything specific, then I know his heart has been engaged with my heart. Then when I go to then do anything, I'm doing it out of his heart without having to sort of, what should I do? How do I do this? What do I do? I just instinctively flow. So I've engaged with him. I've spent some time with him. I'm already in that process of being with him, outworking that in my desire is his desire. And if I then make declarations or decrees or frame or order my day, I'm already doing it from his heart. So I don't have to try and overanalyze it or, you know, trying to make sure that I get everything absolutely correctly spoken or said. So I then know that I'm in alignment with him. I know he's providing for me. I know he's protecting me, and I know he's directing me. Whether I know the specifics, I don't need to, because I know I'm going to get led during my day. So my complete trust in him is I have a total expectation that I will need everything that I need for that day. I will have available to me to enable me to fulfill what God's desire is. And sometimes I feel led to go and say something, like I frame my day, or I call this, or I assign angels to go ahead. And sometimes I don't. But that doesn't mean that my spirit is not engaged in that I am living in the place of love, joy, and peace at rest. So I'm at rest in the fact that I'm in God's provision, because I'm in him. I'm in his protection, and I am being directed to live, you know. And so it's become much more of a, I trust in that relationship than I must get it right because then I'll be okay. And then I only do what I feel really led to do, and my spirit directs me to do it. And then I might make declarations, or I may feel, there's some things going on in the Joshua generation or in that I need to do about. Now, I don't even know where that came from. I didn't ask God, well, is there anything in the, I'm aware of it because I've already expanded my spirit around it. So, you know, even as I engage God, my spirit is extending around everything that I have a measure of authority towards. And so that's already accessible to my spirit, being joined to him and one spirit. So again, my spirit doesn't have to do anything independently. I'm one spirit with him, and therefore I know. And that's what happens. I know, I sense something, I feel something, I know something needs to be dealt with. So I go and deal with it. You know, and then in my general life, I know that I'm living from a framed position of blessing. I am empowered to succeed today. Therefore, everything that I need, whether it be 27, 28 hours today rather than 24, or everything of insight, revelation, anything is available to me, and I live from that. I don't live from how can I get that? What do I need to do to get that? I live from it's already mine because I'm a son of God and I'm in that father-son relationship and he's blessed me. So I don't do anywhere near as much stuff that I used to do cognitively because I don't need to, because I'm living in rest. You know, and I used to try and get into rest by doing something to get into rest. Now I live in rest because I'm living in that I'm loved. I am loved unconditionally in that way. And my relationship with God and the conversations we have, you know, are ongoing. You know, I've been doing the Vision Destiny 2020. So I've been reviewing my journals, reviewing the things God said to me during the year. And it was a lot of stuff. And some of it he'd repeated a number of times because it was emphasizing that this is important. And, you know, I've got ahead of the game in somewhat. And so I'm already thinking as if it's 2020 when actually it isn't yet quite, but I'm already in that zone. And I thought, okay, I pulled together a session. I had 14 sessions of teaching, of which I've sort of done 11. But each day, it just keeps adding more and more and more. And I've got a whole month to go, you know, and I don't think I've ever done more than 12 sessions before. And I'm already up to probably 16 now because number 14 has become 3, even in my conversations in the last 3 days, which were quite intense. And I had some really powerful encounters in the last few days, which, you know, I'll share during that series. But it's an ongoing relational thing that in that one day he said, let's go to the court of the councils of the fathers. So I said, okay, let's go. So we went there. That opened up a whole experience for me doing something, because they gave me a mandate to do something, to legislate into a situation. So I did that. And then today we walked again somewhere else. Another day we walked into his garden, onto the Golden Mountain, and he gave me some keys. Another day, you know, all this stuff is just an ongoing thing, because I'm just one to be with him, and he just unveils whatever he wants to unveil. And some days we just spend time just hanging out. You know, we don't go anywhere. He just talks to me mostly, and I listen, and I journal, and I write down what he's saying, you know. But again, you know, I had an experience this morning in which he said, having already had an encounter, which was pretty mind-blowing, he then said, you need to go back to the Firestones again with me. So then I did that. You know, I'd already encountered something of the depth of his heart towards creation, which was a deeper experience. And then he took me to the Firestones, and I experienced it all over again at another level. Just because I wanted to spend time with him, you know, not because I was trying to find, what should I do? How do I do it? You know, so yes, we can legislate, and we can frame the day by what we say, but it's actually more framed by what I think in my heart. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. See, I can say things because I think they're the right thing to say when they're not in my heart, and they're just basically hot air. They carry nothing. Or I can say nothing, but my thinking in my heart is outworking in what I live. And that's the frequency that's radiating from my heart is effectively bringing order around me all the time. Whether I say the words or just I'm living in that life of love. And so it's become much easier, you know, to just be and not have to try and think, what should I do? But I just am. And therefore, whatever I do is an outflowing from who I am. And therefore, it's so much easier, you know. So I know in the Engaging God program, you know, it's built step by step by step, how ultimately, so people will get to that place where, having learned how to do all these things, most of it you won't need to have to do, because you will be it. It will be you, and that's how you think, and that's how you live, because you think that within you, and you're outworking that in perfect harmony, because you are connected to the Spirit. You're one Spirit, and you don't know what's his thoughts, your thoughts. It's just you are. I am that I am is who he said that he was. He is. He always will be. And he wants us to come to that state where we can live from I am that I am. We are, you know, rather than I'm trying to be or outworking. So it is a journey in which, you know, I learned to frame things. I learned to use legislation very, very specifically. Now I am that legislation. You know, it is so entangled with me. I am totally quantumly entangled with the Spirit. My soul and spirit are quantumly entangled. I'm quantumly entangled with his Spirit. And with that whole being, I am, you know. So because I can think non-linearly to a degree, and I can be in multiple dimensions, multiple versions of me can be doing all sorts of things, whether I'm aware of it or not, because I'm seated with him in heavenly places, not one heavenly place. So that again increases my capacity to spiritually being engaged in a lot of stuff, which I don't always need to know what it is. When God wants me to know something, it's usually because he wants me to share it with others and teach other people about it. That's what I journal generally, you know. Now, some of the journal stuff is is pretty personal, but I share most of it. You know, it's very little I don't share, because if it relates to me, I'm sure it will relate to someone else who's probably going through similar things. So I might as well share, you know, the truth of it all, rather than thinking, well, people wouldn't be interested in that. Well, someone might. If it's one person who might be interested, it's worth sharing it, you know. So I'd encourage you to, you know, just look to the relationship and see where that leads, rather than looking for where do I need to go or what do I need to do. And, you know, when you say, well, I'm sort of going back to the do it yourself, actually, you probably aren't as much as you think you are, because your spirit is probably active and at work in bringing the kingdom around your life and through your life more than you think. And you're probably learning to be more instinctive rather than having to figure it all out. And actually, that isn't do it yourself. That's walking with him and just being who he made you to be, because you're made in his image and likeness. So ultimately, it becomes much less focused on what I'm doing, in just, this is who I am, you know, and I'm totally at rest and content with who I am, whether it appears I'm doing anything or not, in that way. But it is a fascinating journey of discovering that, and particularly just having a deconstruction of the belief systems which tie us to thinking in that old way, related to what I do rather than who I am. And that's old covenant thinking. You know, once I realized that I'm not obliged to be under the law, and therefore I'm not obliged or obligated to do anything in that way, then I can free just to be me in a way which is so much different. And I'm already pleasing to God. He already loves me unconditionally. So I don't have to do anything in that sense to prove that or receive it. Now, my desire is obviously to be outworking sonship, but that doesn't give me my identity. My identity is a son, and I do sonship stuff because I'm a son. And some days sonship stuff is putting my feet up and having a rest and enjoying doing nothing particularly, you know. But because I'm multi-dimensional, I can be doing multiple things without having to even know it, which is great. And whatever my spirit does, I am connected with my soul. And so whatever's flowing there will be made available here when I need it, you know, which is so much more fun. I mean, it's such a more relaxed, peaceful, restful way of living without having to strive for anything anymore. You know, now I went through all the processes to get me to that point where I could be this way. It didn't happen instantly as a miraculous event. It was a long journey of learning to walk with him, engage him, be with him, and want that more than anything else. And I went through a stage of, yeah, I want to know what I'm supposed to do. And one day he just hugged me and wouldn't let go. And I'm like, well, yeah, but what are we doing? Didn't say anything. He just hugged me, wouldn't let me go. So I couldn't do anything. So I got the point that actually I was focused more on doing than being. So he decided to step in and halt that for a while. In the 6 months, Father, Son, and Spirit took turns in hugging me every day. And so after a few weeks, I gave up asking, what are we going to do? Because we weren't going to do anything other than be hugged. You know, that was it. You know, but actually I learned more about Father, Son, and Spirit from those hugs than I learned in any other encounters in reality, because I was heart to heart. And I rested there and didn't strive to get out of there to try and do something. And I found all of the things that I wanted to do all just happened anyway, without me having to do much towards it in those 6 months, you know. So anyway, there we go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Mike. here in Kibdo now, Kibdo Choco, and we're settled in our new place. We have met a lot of people, wonderful people. Things have been moving so fast. God is really having anything to do with us. We don't know anybody here except for one person. But we've been introduced to some of the teachers at the university here in Kibdo, and we've been embraced. And the prophecy over us and what has been happening all along since we got here is that we've been really attracting a lot of young people. And so from walking onto that university campus, attending the English class, we've been invited to help out with the English class. And then as a result of that, we've been meeting with a lot of the kids, I call them kids because I'm so much older than them, college students separately. And now we're going to start meeting with them as a group. We haven't set the time and date yet, but once a week they've agreed to that. And they're so excited about it. We're going to do some sort of spiritual life support type of stuff, just more conversational things, and to see where they are and to give them some idea of really who they are and how they can navigate life spiritually. And I'm just really excited. And all of a sudden, we talked about coming over here and starting an ecclesia, and it was like ready-made, a bunch of 20-year-olds ready to get involved.
Awesome, yeah. Well, you carry a frequency. That's the thing. You're carrying the frequency of the heart of God, and it's drawing people who are pursuing the heart of God because they're sensing within you something of the heart of God. And that's why it's easy when you're in that place that, hey, things just start to flow and accelerate because you're in the heart of God. And the frequency that you carry, people are beginning to resonate with. And when they then start to vibrate at that frequency, other people will resonate with them. And then other people, and that's what discipleship really is. All of us resonating with the heart of the Father as children together, sons of God, and all being ourselves. So, it's great because I've seen, obviously, we've been on this journey for a while, and I've sort of seen from where you were in Atlanta and some of the initial things, where should we be? And, what church should we be at? And all going through all of those questions that we all go through to finding where you are, where you can be, and you can be at peace and rest in there. And it's great that you stepped out, trusting God in that, because a lot of people wouldn't have done. A lot of people would have said, hey, I'm comfortable here. But actually, that you wouldn't have been happy there when God is calling you to be somewhere else. And you would have probably made do, but it would never have been fulfilling. But now you can find this fulfillment in that place where you're in the right place. You're under an open heaven. You are radiating that light, carrying that frequency, and it is going to produce fruit, and there will be fruitfulness, and you will begin to expand and fill that area with, whatever it is that God's calling you to do in it. But by just being, that's the model that people will see from you, in that you can just be, which is great.
We had an amazing meeting.
Yes, we had an amazing meeting with a young man from Baltimore.
Which is my hometown.
Yeah, he just landed, went to a restaurant. Just so happened we were meeting with our college group at that restaurant, about five young people, and we heard someone speaking in English, and we raised our hands, got his attention, and immediately he said, "I'm from Baltimore." It just so happens that Jazz was born in Baltimore, but this is his first stop from Baltimore to Kibdo, and he meets us. And we spent, how long? 2 days. I think 2 days together sharing how we got here, what was going on, and now he ran back to Baltimore, and he says he's rethinking a lot of stuff, and maybe Lord is speaking to him about this, simply because of what you just said, resonation. Our hearts are resonating, and he sees the love of God. He wants to experience that, and he is just really excited about what God has just led him to. Totally accidental. There was no one thinking about it, no planning. It just happened.
He's already gotten involved because he sent us pictures in the Baltimore Harbor. There's this wheel, not sure what they call it, but it cleans up the harbor. And while we were here, we were talking about this river out here, the Atrato River, which is dirty, really dirty. And he was showing us pictures of things that could possibly help with that river. I'm like, why are you getting involved already? Sending us pictures. He said he's going to research into it and all of it. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Tell me what his background is.
His background is working with nonprofits and he's working with homeless people.
That's awesome.
He's 25.
And the great thing is, you know, it's God who builds his ecclesia with living stones, and the frequency that those living stones carry will begin to resonate and connect and join to one another. You know, it is no accident. You know, it's happening because you are in the right place and being who you are, and it will attract people, and it can even attract people from other parts of the world, because there's no distance in the spirit to frequency. You know, sometimes when we get close to people heart to heart, we connect with them, but in the spirit realm, your spirit can connect with anyone else's spirit, because we're all within him, you know. And therefore, you know, when you think that, it's almost like I just have to resonate and, you know, be that frequency of his heart, and people will connect. You know, people will connect, and you're choosing to create the reality, really, that people are going to connect with that which is vibrating at that frequency, you know, which is great, you know. And it means, you know, you don't have to go through, you know, the church planting manual and, you know, go through all, got to check off, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do the other, and I got to do this and whatever. You don't have to go through all of that. You just have to be, and step by step allow him to build with you. Now, you may be a foundation of that, and others may join you in the foundation, but living stones will come together that he will build together relationally, so that you have something that's a blueprint from heaven on the earth, which is going to be something which is going to draw, you know, together. When you're emanating a frequency, it begins to exponentially increase, and therefore other places will be established, whether they ever connect with you or not. Some will, but on the basis of that model that you are demonstrating, heaven on earth, open heaven, you know, living in that dimension of relationship that, you know, will potentially spread right throughout the nation, because that's what's needed, heaven on earth. So, awesome.
When still in Georgia, James actually had an encounter with an angel. I don't know if we shared that or not. And the angel told him that this was not just a mission, but it was a movement. And that we got really the impression God was sending people from all over to this location and spreading out to do great things in the whole Columbia area.
Yeah. And, you know, movements move, you know, they expand, they spread, you know, and that's the whole thing. You know, we're supposed to effectively fill, not just be contained, you know, and that means movement. It needs energy, and that's what frequency is. It's vibrational energy which brings movement, you know, and it will no doubt move, you know, and things will expand, and you will fill those areas, and then you'll inspire other people to fill those areas, and then you'll find that there is movement all over that God's doing, you know, because you're willing to go and just be, you know, which is great.
Well, all right, we'll need this recording, so thank you so much.
Right, okay. Anyone else got anything they want to talk about?
Well, if nobody else is going to something, I'll just go back sort of to the topic. So I think the thing about when you start the journey, like you say, you work very hard and getting there. And did you find that you went sort of through ups and downs or more difficult patches where it seems like where my nature sometimes interferes? And like I think recently what happened is God was playing a bit of chess with me to highlight issues of fatherhood, issues I had. And so he poked me a couple of times with things and then stood back and see how I react and things like that. So I think within that, the journey is sometimes we think it's going to just be progressive, but sometimes we have to take a couple of back steps and look at what's happening and then deal with our souls and the frequencies within our bodies and getting that all aligned, and then move forward again.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like there are milestones on the journey which are places we stay at for a while, and it feels like we've stopped moving, but in reality, you're in the right place for the season that God is at work. And I would say through my journey, there have been lots of seasons in which different things have been happening. Some of those things which have been soul issues, areas where I needed to get to that point of surrender, separating soul and spirit, all of that area. And, all of that, you look back and you can see that this has been a journey that has sometimes been faster, sometimes been slower, and sometimes feels like it's dead stop. But actually the dead stop is, don't think about what you're going to be doing or where you're going. This is the place you need to focus on being right now. And so those seasons, sometimes they are difficult seasons because it is generally through the trials and the troubles and the things which change takes place more than anything else. Often when everything seems to be going great, there's no incentive for anything to change because it's going great. But when you get to the point where you hit a wall or there's an obstacle or something happens in relationship with somebody or some particular thing happens, often that is a time to reflect and to use the season in a practical way. One of the things that God really, a long time ago now, but took me through this process of trauma to transformation. So I became reflective on where I was, why I was the way I was in any situation, and learned to ask the question of God, why did I react that way? Why was that my response? Why was I defensive? Why was I embarrassed? Why was I fearful? What was going on? What caused me to react? And what was that rooted in? And so, I think it's in the transformation series, but it was a little bit like okay, first thing, forgive that situation, the person, whatever's deal with it emotionally by choosing to forgive and release it, but then allow God to evaluate why this happened, what went on, why you responded, all those questions that most often we just bury and try and move on, become the point of being there. So the trauma of the situation, which can be traumatic, and some of my situations were quite traumatic, actually, relatively to me, for some people it would be, nothing. For everyone, someone's mountain is someone else's molehill, if you like. In reality, it's all relative, but it doesn't matter. It's relative, and therefore, for me, things can be traumatic, even if someone else think I'm a drama queen. At the end of the day, it's like it's relative to us. And so I went through some things which were trials, and I had to face the trials. Some of them were trials which addressed my soul. Some of them were trials which addressed relationship with others, which is related to my soul and my fact that a dead person doesn't get hurt or offended or upset. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have emotions, but those emotions should be a good servant to us and not a master. And so you learn I learned to be more reflective of why I was feeling the way I was feeling, what was going on. And that enabled God to, in the process, highlight the areas that he wanted to deal with. Some of those were blind self areas that the trauma brought to the surface. Some of that, because I share with other people and I'm open, in discipleship relationships with people, helped them to speak into situations that I couldn't see. And you have this Jaharis window process of, I found that was a helpful way of looking at my life and where I was from, okay, there is revealed self. There's things I don't mind anyone knowing. I'm very open. Then there could be hidden self, things that actually I know, but I'm not really wanting anyone else to know. And if I've got any of those areas, why? And that was one of the questions I would ask myself. How would you feel if someone else knew about this? And if there was fear or anxiety or whatever, it's like, why? Do you think they're going to reject you? If they do, is that going to make any difference to you? Do you know that I accept you? All of the, it becomes a process, which is, it's easier to ask yourself the question because you're not afraid of the answer, because you trust in his love, but you still have to go through the processes that are there. It isn't a magic wand quick fix. It is a process driven thing that, led thing really. It's not even being driven, it's being led through relationship. And so each of those points, when I came to a point where God wanted to do something that he needed to do for me to get to the next area, then often it feels like I am being restricted here, that I'm not being free, I'm not let go to go somewhere else. And that was exactly what was needed. I needed to stay where I was and deal with whatever it was, then move on. And then there would be other seasons that came in that whole journey and process. And I think so many people focus on the destination as the point. Actually, it's the journey that's the point. The journey will continue to go on. There is no real destination per se. There are just areas of stopping on the journey, or places we visit, or things we do in those places that are all part of the journey and process. So, yeah, I've hit quite a number of areas. 2012 was a key area, 11, 12. Then, 2014 was another one. And then, 2016 was, when I look back, a lot of those transformatory events or situations were birthed out of me engaging the firestones, and that became I'm engaged in a precept of God, which I cannot remain the same over. I can't think the same. I can't act the same. I have to change, or I am going to change as a result of this experience. And then it takes usually 18 months to 2 years to outwork one of those experiences. So having just engaged the firestones today, I'm looking forward to some change, because I can't encounter that at that level without there being a transformation as a result. Now, some of that was very hard, and some of it was seemingly quite easy. The deconstruction phase from 2016 was really intensely difficult, really challenging a lot of what I believed theologically, doctrinally. A lot of those things, completely got transformed by engaging the love of God, which didn't align with what I believed. So, that was a difficult process. Yeah. But I guess because I talk to people about the process a lot, it's quite cathartic, because you sort of verbalize your process, and I do it online publicly. So in a sense, it's like and you sort of hear yourself saying things that you've never said before, and you're really expressing things you didn't even really think openly, but they're there. And so I find that happens a lot, that I share some things and I'm sort of like listening to myself, sharing it. And that helps me have perspective, because I get perspective even in the midst of sharing something that it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense in how I've just shared it, but I wouldn't have been able to articulate that without the situation that brought it out. And that might be prompted by someone else's question. It might be prompted by any situation in that ends up that I'm talking about something that I didn't have any intention of talking about, but created change even by expressing it, or showed me that I had changed by expressing it. Because sometimes I share some things and I'm thinking, I don't think that, but I realize that now I do. And because I've gone through that change of renewing my mind, and I sometimes didn't even realize that my thinking had changed the way it had. But then I talk to somebody and all of a sudden I'm talking in a way that I hadn't talked before, realizing that I now think differently. So it is quite good to engage with people that way. And I find it, a sort of a part of my journey to be able to talk and discuss. And I know sometimes some groups have drawn things out of me that I didn't really want to talk about, but they pushed the right buttons, and then I ended up going down this path that I didn't really want to go, but God wanted me to go. And if he'd asked me to go down it, I would have probably hesitated. But because it came out of this, hey, I'm just in this situation where I'm talking, I'm like, okay, it's the cat's out of the bag. It's okay, I've now said this. Okay, I can't put it back in the bag, so I guess that's going to take it to another level in areas, And I find myself doing that quite a lot, What comes out of my mouth is not what I was thinking that should come out of my mouth, in a good way, So yeah, follow the journey and don't be afraid of things that seem like you're not going anywhere, or you seem like you're going around in circles, because sometimes you have to cover the same ground several times for it to, be ready to move on, and it's okay. So long as, you're in relationship with God, sometimes that feels more distant and less intimate when that is required for that point. And God knows exactly what's required for every point on the journey. Now generally, my journals are pretty full, so I don't have very often where I don't have, conversation or stuff going on. But sometimes you do get to a point where the things God's talking to you about become more personal rather than strategic. And then I'm realizing that he's looking at me at a level that I wasn't looking at myself at. And therefore I need to actually take a reflective look, because we can avoid doing that, not deliberately because we don't want to, just because we're focused on doing all the good things that there are to do and we're just being at work. But sometimes he says, okay, take a rest and reflect. And that usually comes with me in conversations which become more personal. And I then do less legislative things at that point and more reflective stuff. But yeah. Journey is relational. Destination is usually not so much.
I think Mike.
So I wanted to say something.
Yeah, go on,
Today,
Jackie. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, carry on. It's okay. Go on.
Okay. I was just wanting to say, today's Thanksgiving here in America.
All right, yes.
And for some reason this year, it's really been touching me deeply. And so as I was engaging the Father this morning, as I went before him, normally I ask him if I could settle on his lap, but I had a sensation that he picked me up and set me on his lap today, which was real sweet in my relationship with him. I was thankful. But I began asking him, why am I so deeply touched by Thanksgiving this year? And he brought back to my mind that the Engaging God series, as Joshua generation, we are forerunners. And that's why he was saying that's why you're so touched, because the Pilgrims came over here as forerunners to establish America. And he said they wanted religious freedom. And he said, you want free of the religious system. And he said, you're a forerunner, and you're going forth and having to establish in your own heart. Now, I'm trusting that I will have that governmental place in function. It's not yet, but it's more of a personal work that God's doing with me now. And it just touched me that he began revealing to me that that's why it was so touching, because of the Forerunner anointing in the Engaging God series, and that I do want religious freedom. And I've been away from the local church for 3 years, which I would have never thought that I would have let go of the local church. And there again, it has brought such freedom and liberty, because the cry of my heart before God was, I want to experience everything on this earth, God, that you will allow me to experience. And little did I know how much that would entail. And so I just wanted to share.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great. And it's great that God's involved in our everyday life. I mean, that's the key with this. And, I am aware of Thanksgiving, but we don't have Thanksgiving like that in the UK as an event. Although I've got a friend who actually I met in Atlanta 2014 who now lives here, that we're actually having a Thanksgiving meal tomorrow night, a bunch of us. So it is a little bit more on my radar than it was. But it is great when you think of it in those terms, and how he can use something as simple as a holiday or whatever to convey something meaningful and affirm you. That's the great thing. He has affirmed you as a forerunner and one who is living in religious freedom and will be a model for others, and eventually hopefully join with others who can live in that freedom together. Because there were more than one pilgrim, fortunately. Otherwise, you wouldn't have too much population in the US by now. So there's a sense there was lots of pilgrims that came, and they then formed colonies, they formed states, they formed areas where they began to expand that religious freedom outwards. Now, sometimes in that analogy, not always as good as they could have done in terms of conquering other people and whatever, but the figurative sense of that is, we are here for colonization. We do want to bring more and more people into that relationship with God and see the kingdom of God fill the earth. And you have to be those who extend that beyond your own comfort zone to go beyond. And I think, forerunners have to go before so others can follow, and I'm sure there are others that God's got designed to see where you are and resonate with the frequency that you're carrying also, so that they can also begin to come from the wilderness experience into the promised land that is your inheritance. So it's awesome. And for you, that will now be a milestone of, hey, I now realize that what's going on is this affirmation of who I am in this forerunner role as part of the Joshua generation. So that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I was just going to chime in on what you were saying before about the renewed thinking and not even realizing sometimes that you're thinking on some things that change. And I found that as we have sought more intimacy with God and just into that loving relationship with Him, I think what happens is that we become more open to the heavenly influences than the negative influences, because I definitely know that as far as being embarrassed or getting upset, you know, much more quickly. I'm not even there anymore. And I'm like, when did that happen? Because I know there are things that trigger me, but now it's just like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm not being triggered. I don't even have a care about that. That's different. You know, and I didn't even know that I had gone into that change.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and it is sometimes only when you're having to face something that you realize that you've changed, you know, or you realize that your thinking is different. And that's really why I think these little milestones and these little events in our life are things that become marker posts or things to just show us that things are moving, that we have changed, you know, whether there's a recognition we're a forerunner, or, you know, all those things are just little points that become a memory on our journey, you know. And looking back, you know, I don't know when I'm going to do it, but, you know, I'm going to sort of, you know, write another book, really just sharing my journals, you know, and sharing where I've come from really since 2012, mostly when I started journaling seriously, and the way God's has led me through those milestones, those points along the way to get you where you are, you know. And, you know, having just looked at a whole year's worth of journals and realized, you know, the things that God was doing and how that related to what he did last year, and no doubt how it was going to relate to what he did next year, it's helpful. You know, I think sometimes it's just great to be able to see the significance of certain things in our lives that we become thankful for. And, you know, the more we operate in joy and peace and love and all of that. So yeah, I think it is you know, sometimes the busyness of sort of life stops us reflecting, you know, because we've got to do more, right? And I think the more reflective we can become, I think will empower us to do things better, you know, in a sense, because we will become more self-aware and more aware of others. You know, the more aware you are of self, the easier it is to be aware of others, and that enables you to relate to others and resonate with others and relate to and empathize with others in the right way and help each other, you know. So yeah, it is encouraging to see the change that takes place and the thinking which has been renewed, because usually it is the difficult situations which bring to the surface those things which we don't necessarily know, good or bad. You know, this year has been quite a challenge for me. In some ways, my relationship with God is stronger than ever, but I had to deal with emotional situations which were outside of my control. You know, I'm used to dealing with things inside my control, but then things happen which you weren't seeing. They happened, they affected you, and then you have to deal with those things. How you deal with them is an indication of the reality of where your relationship really is, rather than where you think it was, you know. And so, you know, beginning of the year was a very challenging period of dealing with betrayal and dealing with people who were close to me, sort of, you know, the breakdown of that. And it was hard, you know. And, you know, I you know, you can't deny emotions. You've got to deal with them. You got to go through them, and you learn from it, actually, to be more loving and to be more accepting, even to people who don't treat you very nicely. And then that was just a preparation for realizing that, you know, I'm sort of a controversial figure in some areas, which I didn't particularly realize that I was on people's agenda, as being, you know, someone to avoid or to look out for in a negative way. So then you have to deal with that. And then you realize that people who you respect and who you have honored, you know, don't think the same about you. And it's just like, okay, well, okay, I've got to deal with that. You know, so you find that a lot of these things are all stepping stones that enable you to then deal with things differently if I hadn't have dealt with the things in the beginning of the year, then I wouldn't have dealt with the things in the middle of the year in the same way. You know, and then situations arose, you know, with my family and, you know, children and things that they went through, again, outside of my control. But how am I going to respond to that? How am I going to deal with what's going on in this way? And you have to work that out, you know. So, you know, I'm still smiling and still loved by God and everything else, but, you know, and I'm looking forward to next year in a very positive light, and looking forward to having embraced what God's done this year and what's happened this year. But it's been tough, you know, but I think then that enables you to relate to other people who've gone through difficult situations and tough, you know. And I think for those who are forerunners, to be real and honest about real life, rather than pretending to be the paragon of virtue and everything's wonderful all the time, you know, in that sense, you know, I think makes it real, you know, because people are looking for real. You know, we have a therapeutic community, and, you know, we've gone through a deconstruction process of what is church and what is ecclesia and what is gathering and why do you gather and why do you do all these things. And there's been this process of letting it all go, and it eventually got to the point where all of the existing leaders who were involved in what we were doing got to the point where they realized that they couldn't take it any further and they had to give up, you know, which was the point that God wanted to bring everyone to in reality. But some people held on to that a lot longer than others, you know. But it got to the point where everyone said, okay, no, we can't do this, certainly in our own strength, or trying to do this. And so that was the point that God got it at. And so we had this meeting, and we have got this group, this WhatsApp group called, you know, Moving Forward Together. So it's like we put it together. It's like, okay, how are we going to move forward? Well, you can't move forward and if you're anchored to the past by the people who are trying to move you forward, but they're anchored to the past. So as soon as they all let go of being anchored to the past, then you could move forward. And so we got together, and they were just going to share, hey, that they'd all resigned from this situation, and now we were, what does God want us to do? You know, how are we going to outwork this? And we had this meeting, and we had people turn up to the meeting that we weren't expecting to. And some of them were people from our move on houses that have gone through our therapy community. And so they shared how what we had been doing had impacted their lives. And it was a truly amazing thing to hear, because, you know, the people who had given up eventually, their thing was, oh, everything's falling apart. You know, it's like, oh, it's all falling apart. I mean, we don't know, we can't hold this all together. We don't know, you know. And actually, it wasn't falling apart. It was just being deconstructed by God so he could put it back together. And we had to let him, we had to stop holding it together for him to completely deconstruct it so he could put it back together the right way. And so it was wonderful to hear, and there were 6 or 7 guys just sharing that some of the things that we thought were not good had blessed them so much, and how that just being invited into relationship had made such a difference to them. And the fact that when we stopped doing the singing and stopped doing the usual meeting stuff and just started to relate to them and each other, how real they found that, and how actually it encouraged them that they didn't have to present any superficial face. They could be real because we were real. And that was so positive. I mean, one guy shared, and he was really moved that, and this guy had been in and out of prison for a lot of his life, and, you know, had a horrendous life story, which I have heard. And he was basically invited to come and help one of our guys move some furniture in his house, which to me, that would be, what is that? It's just meaningless. Okay, great. I can help someone move some furniture. No problem. To him, being trusted to go into someone's house was a huge event for him in his recovery and in his journey. That he was trusted and invited to help. Such a little thing, for most of us, for him was a huge moment. And there were several people who shared similar moments, really, which, again, was just such a blessing. And so on the surface, you get to the point where you're like, okay, we're at the end of ourselves in this. But you realize that all the way, when you were thinking this isn't working, God was still using it, and he was still blessing people through it, and still does. And now we can because it opened up of, hey, let's spend some more time together, so we can open up our homes and we can eat together and we can fellowship together, rather than this thing we called church. Because that actually is what it is, relationship with God and each other. So Sunday evening, a couple who actually just joined us from another part of the country, and some of the existing people were like, oh, do they know what they're joining? This is like, they were able to open up their home and like invite people to come, and everyone just got to know each other and share things in a relational way. And then we just engaged heaven together, and it was just a very natural, real experience. No one was trying to be anything they weren't, and it was real. And now God is able to put living stones together in a way that we could never do, trying to do it in our old understanding and our old way. Even though we were trying to do it in a new way, the old way had to end before the new way could really fully start to function. So we changed practice before we changed mindsets, and it didn't work. Because we tried to change the practice to change the mindset. But you have to have a mindset that enables you to practice something different. So we had sort of 7 or 8 years of learning a lot in theory and learning a lot in reality, but we changed the structural things we were doing rather than actually focused on establishing the relationship which will enable the change of mindsets and belief systems that then would outwork something differently, not because we had to change the structure, but we would be different and we would do things differently just because we're different, And so going back, 8 years, if I'd known all that now, what I knew now that I knew, then that I knew now, we would have done things very differently. And one of the things God said not that long ago was, well, why don't you then? You don't have to keep trying to do it and keep appearances up. You can just go with this and allow this to happen. And eventually it took us to the point of complete deconstruction and God now bringing things together, and people now feel, in a sense, encouraged, by what they didn't know through those sharing testimonies. People were feeling a little bit discouraged. I mean, I wasn't, because I knew that this had to come to an end, and I wasn't going to do it, because if I did it, it would just reinforce the same old thing of, well, someone does it, rather than we're all following God to the point where this now happens, because we've come to this ourselves, rather than someone saying, hey, you need to knock this on the head and wind this up this way, which I saw, and God told me about 9 months ago, but there was a lot of things needed to come to the surface in those 9 months. Relationship things, all sorts of things that need to come to the surface for you to get to the point where now God is able to do something, because you are shaped somewhat differently as living stones, having gone through the process of being transformed somewhat, So it is a wonderful journey, and sometimes you don't actually realize quite exactly how much is going on at that point in the journey than you thought. So yeah, awesome. Okay, all right, I'm gonna leave it there.